Hi, this is Kurt Doolittle for the Propertarian Institute. The vocabulary I make use of is perhaps the most challenging hurdle to learning propertarianism. I needed a precise technical language that was commensurable across all fields, and to produce that vocabulary took me quite a bit of work, and it's going to take you a little bit of work to learn it. So I'm going to attempt to prepare you for that deluge. First, we're going to use a multidisciplinary vocabulary, and really I'm going to draw upon every single discipline. Um, Particularly physics, the philosophy of mathematics, finance and economics, and law. You shouldn't be afraid of the term the philosophy of mathematics because I'm really going to rely on some very simple ideas, and it'll allow me to help you understand how the same pattern that's visible in mathematics very clearly is visible in every other discipline, but less clearly. The second, we're going to use operational language and grammar, and this is sort of a reduced vocabulary and reduced grammar. And in particular, it eliminates the verb to be, meaning is, are, etc. I'll cover operational language in depth later on. Next, I'm going to redefine a lot of terms because of their conversion to operational language. I am going to come up with a few neologisms, meaning new terms. In some cases, I really didn't have any choice because if I tried to use an existing term, it would have simply led to confusion, and there were some things I wanted to brand or specifically label. I'm going to make use of something I'm ridiculed for all the time, a lot of isms. You understand what an ism is. I'll give you the definition. An ism is a distinctive practice, system, or philosophy. Basically, it's a method of decision making that provides categories, values, and a means of decidability in a domain of inquiry. So think of isms as a taxonomy of ideas in the history of philosophy. You can really reduce it to saying it's a way of thinking or a way of putting together a set of decisions. In science, we'd call it a paradigm or a network of theories that provided some means of decidability within a subject matter. So just as I would say Newtonian or Einsteinian physics, I would say rationalism versus empiricism in philosophy. So I'm going to use quite a few isms. Look them up in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The next, which should be obvious by now, is that we're going to use some wordy prose. Now, one of the reasons I like the video format or this format is I can speak a little more extemporaneously and I don't have to read a script. And in that sense, we tend to be a little more casual in our conversation. But if you certainly read anything I write, you'll learn that analytic philosophy is of necessity wordy. Operational language is of necessity even more wordy. If you looked at how to write algorithms, say in a programming language or in the law, it's even more wordy. And so what you should expect is that propertarianism, as a technical language of natural law, is going to be wordy. Now, ordinary language varies from formal, meaning low context and high precision, to common to idiomatic, meaning high context and low precision. The lower the precision, the higher the context, the more suggestion is created by the speaker, and the more substitution is required of the audience. And it's through this misuse of suggestion that deception is created. So in operational language, we seek to eliminate all possible suggestion and create as close as possible what amounts to transactions. An eccentricity I've developed to help the reader is that I bold keywords in sentences and paragraphs in order to make it easier for you to scan a page in order to find an idea, or to scan a page and quickly understand the topics. The second is I use German capitalization, which again annoys some people. German capitalization means that I tend to proper case nouns that represent ideas. So one of the ways I point out to you that, hey, this word might have a specific definition in propertarianism is that I will capitalize it. I use a lot of parentheticals. Now, a parenthetical is a technique. So, for example, if I say, this is a sentence, open parentheses, phrase, close parentheses, I've used phrase to augment the term sentence. Or I could say, for example, to assist in interpretation, open parentheses, or to prevent misinterpretation, close parentheses. So I use a lot of parentheticals. A parenthetical is a technique I learned from people in a particular branch of philosophy, and it helps us create a parallel or a limit to whatever we're talking about, so it's less open to misinterpretation. So sometimes, if there are three ways of talking about something, I'll use the casual language or the most common language to describe it, and then I'll use parentheticals along the way in order to show the parallel with the other ways of describing it. The next thing I'll do is I'll make use of series, lists, and tables. Now, just as parentheticals help us by providing limits or parallels, and just as operational language limits the vocabulary and grammar that we can use in a sentence, using series, lists, and tables deflates terms or delineates the difference between terms. And so I'll give you a couple examples. I'll usually use a sequence or a series like this, like religion, ideology, philosophy, and science, or perhaps imaginable, possible, preferable, good, decidable. Or the one you'll hear me talk about most is falsehood. Now, if I said ignorance, error, bias, wishful thinking, suggestion, obscurantism, fictionalism, and deceit, I'm creating a series that says, well, this is specifically what I mean by falsehood, and I'm educating you as to what the different methods of creating falsehoods are. And so we tend to use a lot of those series. I also use a lot of repetition. I'll use the series as a means of repetition, and I'll repeat ideas in various contexts because I want to show you how the idea has a lot of explanatory power. Next, as a language of natural law, propertarianism is somewhat prosecutorial. I come across as a prosecutor very often. It's pretty unforgiving. Next, I built this system by applying truth to everything, and in doing so, I slaughtered my own sacred cows, and I learned that much of what I had previously held was either not quite so true, was false, or was outright harmful. So the truth, like the jury, has no mercy, so to speak, and I'm probably going to slaughter a lot of your sacred cows. Some of our ideas are really important to us, but if you work at them and you understand that there's value in them, it turns out you can provide the same value in that idea except truthfully. And I think wherever I slaughter a sacred cow, I create a solution that is stated truthfully instead of untruthfully. The last that you'll notice most obviously is the reintroduction of violence. In most discourse, especially argument, I get a little upset about this when I read books on argumentation, is that they're very Victorian and they assume very good manners on the part of each person, but that only works if everybody's ingenuous. What we find in most political discourses, people are just the opposite. They're incredibly disingenuous. So one of the things I've done is remove that nicety, and I've restored what I'd call the ternary logic of cooperation from the binary. The binary being our choices are to cooperate or not cooperate, when there are always three choices: either not cooperate, cooperate, or war. So predation is back on the table. And I do this because much of the political rhetoric that we are subject to exists under the presumption that violence is not an option. And this allows a lot of deceit to occur. And so I intentionally, and sometimes exaggeratedly so, return violence to the discourse so that we understand that cooperation is not mandatory, boycott is not mandatory, and that conflict is always on the table. And as such, revolution is always on the table. That's what I wanted to talk about in preparing you for the vocabulary. Thanks.